No, actually, there it was because for the first few years of my travels, I was actually doing the tallest mountain in every country that I went to. So I was hiking up the tallest mountain, and then eventually I just got a bit worn down, and there was some mountains like I was doing the ones that were 6,000 plus, and then I was in some countries where it's 7, 8,000 plus, and I just it's taken a lot out of me. Um, I'd still like to keep going because I'm at like 75 of the tallest peaks in the world done. But that also, includes some countries. Like for example, Tuvalu, I climbed to the top on my hands and knees just to have it because it's 5 meters. The highest point is 5 meters, right? So there's some countries I was in that it was really really short, but and there's it was in Bhutan, and it's not the tallest mountain in Bhutan because that mountain's actually like banned. You can't climb it. But it was just under 7,000 meters, like 6,700 something meters in Bhutan. Yeah, yeah. Nobody has been recorded to actually summit it. It's so dangerous. There's just a lot of sheer face and ice and glaciers, and yeah, it's a really technical mountain. So nobody's actually. A lot of people tried, and a lot of people died. Like one year there was 14 deaths or something, like from people trying, and then in the 80s they banned being above 7,000 meters in Bhutan. So you could only do the mountains that are lower than
Are
7,000.
climbing with full climbing gear,
It depends on the mountain, but for Bhutan, yeah, you needed some ice picks and some crampons and all that kind of
so
stuff.
you do all that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 75 of the tallest peaks. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, what's Everest in comparison?
I think it's 86,
Wow.
86 something, 86. You mean in height?
Yeah.
Yeah, 8,600 and something or 8,800 something. Yeah.
And the other was 75,
No, 67.
67.
Yeah.
Have you done what's in Canada?
Mount Logan.
Have you
I haven't done it yet because even though it's just under 6,000 meters, it's a long trek. Like it's not something you can do in a few days. We probably could. I think some people have done it in 3 days, but it typically takes like 13 to 15 days because it's actually Mount Logan is one of the widest mountains in the world.
And you're
Uh,
not going straight up.
yeah, yeah. So you got to go on one of the ridges, and it takes a long time. The youngest person I've done it, I think she was 13. Who did it took like 14 days or something, and it was part of a sponsored expedition with us. It was pretty cool. Yeah, but I do have the world record for the fastest climb up and down of Mount Tamanivi in Fiji. And the guy who broke the record before me, and they had this book there, like this record book, and it's basically this little village just at the base of Mount Tamanivi. It's also called Mount Victoria, like when the British were colonists there, but they changed it back to the original name. And to get permission to climb on the mountain, you actually have to go there, ask the chief of this village if you'll have permission. They do this whole ceremony, and they drink this drink made out of kava, and basically get in touch with like their ancestors, and then ask permission if it's okay for somebody to go on the mountain. So you had to, like, somebody told me bring them a gift because they won't do the ceremony. So I bought them fish because they're inland. So that morning I got some fresh fish and brought them, and then whatever, they did the whole ceremony. And the night before, I was going barefoot for a while on a lot of things, and throughout the Pacific I spent like a few weeks just barefoot the entire time. And I remember made a bet with the guy at the hostel the night before, and he was like, "Are you gonna do the mountain barefoot?" I said, "If I go there and the chief is wearing anything on his feet, I'll do it with shoes. If not, I'll do it barefoot." And I went there, and the guy didn't have any shoes. So whatever, we did this whole ceremony, and then they gave me permission to do the climb. And the guy wasn't wearing shoes, so I left my shoes there. And then they're like, "Okay, you can go. The track is right there." And then yeah, there's only one way up, one way down. It's really not a track. It's just mud and like bamboo shoots and stuff, and like it's really a rough. Like there's a place where you basically have to like latch onto the trees, and like because there's just no track, and you just go between the trees and stuff. And then the chief was like, "Your shoes are there," and I'm like, "Nah, I'm good. It's all right. I'll do it without." And it later turned out to be a pretty big mistake, but I'll say that after. But anyways, I went up and down record time, and one of the guys asked me when I came back. He's like, did you not make it? Was there something falling on the track or anything like that? I was like, no, I made it up, showed them the photos with the summit sign and everything. So they open their book and go through all the fastest times. And the guy who had the fastest time in 1996 was actually Chuck Norris's brother, Aaron Norris. And I beat his record by like 6 minutes. And he had done it 3 times to get the record. So he actually apparently really likes Fiji, and he spends a lot of time in Fiji. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. I don't know, because this place, doesn't have much. Not that Fiji is so underdeveloped, but Mount Taumanivi is right in the middle of the main island, and there's no paved roads. It's all mountain roads to get there. I thought that I was gonna abandon my rental vehicle. Like I rented this small Corolla or something, and I had to cross this little river with it, and there's just these boulders on the road. And at one point on the way back, I was like, I'm just gonna have to like ditch the vehicle and pay the guy like a couple $1,000s or something for the vehicle, because I was sure I wasn't making it out of one of the little river crossings. But so it's pretty remote. I don't know, like there would be no way of contacting. This was back in I think 2016 or something. So I wonder if anybody else beat it, or if Aaron Norris went back. And
But you have to add that you did it barefoot. So
I guess it's pretty.
That's amazing.
And if it's Chuck Norris, he doesn't climb mountains, he just pushes them.
Yeah. But yeah, it turned out. So obviously doing on the track and stuff, like you get sharp pieces of wood underneath, like sticking into my feet, and cuts and stuff. And then I kept going from island to island in the Pacific, doing all the tallest mountains. And there was another mountain in Vanuatu, Tabue Masana, and there's about 6 people who do it every year because there's no track. And to get there, you got to fly to the most northern island and then take a boat for a few days to a village. And from there, you can access the mountain. And like the flies in some of these places in the Pacific are just crazy. Around the cuts and stuff on my feet, I had just flies. Like I was wearing 2 pairs of socks, and the flies were digging through the socks just to get at the blood there. And there's a lot of like staph infection and stuff. So I got a staph infection while doing Tabue Masana. I almost lost my left foot. Like it was black and like so swollen. I was flying from island to island, and there was just like, it was either way too expensive. So I ended up in New Zealand. They wanted like $6,400 for me to go in the hospital and look at my foot and everything. New Caledonia, it was Easter weekend. So there was just like nobody no doctor wanted to come in for the weekend. So that's when I ended up going to Niue. I told you guys a lot of stories about Niue. Yeah. And the first thing I did when I got off the plane was I went straight to the hospital. There was like really like straw roof type hospital. And then I saw the doctor, and I was like, I think I have a staph infection. He was like, all right, show me. So I like lift my pant leg up, and it's just like black and like really swollen. He's like, all right, yeah. He's like, that's really bad. So they had me in a little wheelchair. They wheeled me over. They had their own pharmacy there, and he's like, I'm gonna give you the strongest stuff, all the painkillers and the meds and all that. And the nurses came, just cleaned out the wounds and everything. And then he's like, it might start getting a bit expensive. Do you want them to keep doing something, or do you want to like stop here? And I'm like how expensive are we talking about? So he's calculating everything, and he's like, it's gonna be 36 New Zealand dollars so far. And I'm like, bring the nurses back. Just like it's so cheap and compared to like a developed country like New Zealand or anything. So
Wow.
yeah.
And did it take long for it to heal?
No, actually 2 days. 2 days, it really swelled down, and then the swelling was gone, and my foot had color again, and I could walk on it again. So yeah.
More than one reason.
I'd like to get back to doing the hikes and stuff, like the tallest mountains, but it just had a different focus. Like and certain countries are tough. I wanted to do Antarctica, tallest mountain there, but you need permits. It's about $40,000 to attempt a climb, which is just so much money. But like Everest is also like $60,000 or more now to attempt to climb. So yeah.
Would you want to do Everest?
Yeah, I kind of set this goal when I was 32. I would do it. So I got 4.5 years to maybe do it. But that was just something I said when I was like 24 or 23. And I was like, yeah, I got plenty of time before then. So I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Some of your
Yeah. But like, so anyways, we will get to Antarctica and the things that we're here to talk about, I guess. But there was a doctor on our ship when we were in Antarctica, and his dream was to summit Everest, and he attempted 3 times but had to turn around. He spent the 60K 3 times, and because of snowstorms and everything, he just had to turn around. And you really have to be able to stomach that. Like you could be his third attempt, they were 100 meters from the summit, and they had to turn around, and it's like you just have to,
You have to.
yeah, like
Suck it
yeah,
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then you just have to go down like the whole way again and try again another time, right? Yeah,
It is.
yeah,
And some people, it's like their life's dream, and that's probably the only chance they'll get. And
yeah, right. But it's crazy that it's so expensive. Like it just the tax that goes to the Nepali government is 11,000 out of that. So they set that tax, and then all the other logistics of having a team, and it takes a long time too. I think the average ascent is 2 months or something, 2-3 months. So
Oh.
Up and down. And
yeah, yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah,
Shall we start the
yeah.
event?
Let's do it.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to said podcast. We've got with us Maximilien Leblanc, Max Leblanc, also known as Metal Max.
There we go.
And you're here to talk to us about something world-wise.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to let you go.
All right. Well, I guess I've traveled a lot the last 7 years, and traveling basically nonstop. Managed to go to 184 countries in that 7-year time, so seen quite a bit. And it's always been kind of a nature focus for me. I've always been found that I've much more grounded in nature, and I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of really cool places like the North Pole and also Antarctica and the Amazon, just different places that would seem like they're important in our world, places that are so mystical or unique. And I guess, yeah, I'll just go straight to what kind of what made so many different things that are really cool click together. It was when I was in Antarctica, and I was talking to the scientist. She was researching the plastics in the ocean, and for some reason there is no like huge chunks of plastic that is found in the Southern Ocean. It's just the microplastics, so small particles of it. And she was studying why, and she found that Antarctica kind of has a shield around it, so there's a current going counterclockwise around the whole continent, and inside of that current there's another current going counterclockwise. So it's literally like if there's just this whirlwind around, or this whirlpool around Antarctica that's pushing everything out, so keeping it cool, keeping it kind of safe, but separated from the rest of the world. And then I was talking to her about ocean currents, and she showed me on the globe the patterns of ocean currents. And whenever I looked at it and what she was saying, I kind of realized that it's exactly the same as our circulatory system, the same way that our heart would work and our veins and arteries would work. So I'll show you guys on the globe. But let's say we get the Atlantic Ocean, and right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and all other oceans, there's a gyro current, right? So it's literally just a circle. And from that circle, there is a current bringing water to the poles, so both South Pole and North Pole, and there's a current bringing cold water back into that gyro circle in the middle. So then if you look at the difference between warm water and cold water can hold nutrients and is very rich in life, whereas warm water is depleted from nutrients, and it's not, there's no animals that can feed on anything that's left inside of the cold water. So essentially, what the earth is doing, what the ocean currents are bringing the warm water that's been that all the life took nutrients out of around the equator, and the currents bring it up to the poles, and the water gets cold again and absorbs nutrients, and there's a current that brings it back down into near the equator where there's more life on the earth. So it's basically exactly like our heart, right? Our heart brings blood, essentially blood without nutrients, without oxygen, to the lungs. It gets oxygenized, and then our arteries bring it out to our extremities. And once that oxygen goes into every part, the muscles and everything that it needs to go to, the veins bring it back to the heart, and the whole cycle starts over again. So essentially, the ocean currents pretty much act like our circulatory system in our body. And I thought that was super cool. It was clearly right there. You can see it, that's exactly what's happening in the oceans. And then a lot of other things that I noticed in the world while traveling kind of just clicked together, where they're kind of like other body parts, and that the world is actually, first of all, always seeking balance, but it's this whole living system on its own. So then, for example, I had a chance to be with a research team in the north of Svalbard, which is these islands close to the North Pole. And they were studying diatoms, which are these single-celled algae in the bottom of the ocean. And they're one of the first forms of life. And they're also one of the first forms of fertilizing soil. And they're basically like bottom of the food chain for a lot of life on Earth. And they're mostly found at the bottom of the oceans. But where there's a higher richness in diatoms are typically where there's glaciers. And like a lot of people, now it's kind of the trend to talk about global warming and all that. And a lot of people don't seem to think that it's like a natural occurrence, although, there's warming and cooling periods of the Earth. It's a normal thing, right? Climate change would happen regardless if we're here or not. But when the Earth is warming, what happens, the glaciers carve and glaciers break off and then into the oceans and hit the bottom of the ocean. And the diatoms are all expelled out of the water into the air. And if you look at the jet streams, so essentially the currents in the sky, those currents are actually coming from places that are very rich in glaciers. And they pick up those diatoms and they're sent out to the world. And if you look where the jet streams pass, they pass over the Amazon, they pass over the borealis forest that we have here in the Northwest, and all other places on Earth that have rich forces, right, that need to be fertilized somehow. It's all being deposited from jet streams and from diatoms being expelled into the air from these glaciers carving. So what we know about heating periods of the world is that it's setting up for thicker forests, right, like more jungles and more temperate weather. So there needs to be more fertilization in the ground because the world is just warming, and there's going to be, that's essentially what must have happened for different warming periods in the world. So we know that there's now this like respiratory system, there's now this circulatory system for the world. And the same thing, the jet streams pick up iron from the sands from the Saharas and deposit it in the Americas and in the Amazon as well. So that's, kind of different parts of the human body, but that you can also recognize on the Earth. And then I started, kind of connecting other dots and all these other things. And one thing that always fascinated me, and I didn't get the chance to go see it in person yet, but in Venezuela, close to the Angel Falls, the tallest waterfall in the world, there's actually a never-ending lightning storm. So there's this lightning storm that has always been there, and it's always there. It kind of starts in the afternoon and goes until the early morning hours, and then it doesn't strike for a few hours, and then it starts over every single day. It's been there for as long as any oral tradition from local tribes go back hundreds of years, and the storm has been active ever since. And then some people have studied this storm and why it happens. It's just the air currents with the sheer rock face and the mouth of the river. It's just the perfect settings for it, but it's the only place on Earth that it happens. And then they started analyzing what's coming out of it, and it's actually creating ozone. So it's the biggest producer of ozone in the world. And as we know, we need an ozone layer around the Earth to protect us, essentially like skin. So the ozone layer would be essentially the skin of the world. And also this electricity, it's really easy to think that it could be like, as we know, our brain works on electrical impulse. And the storm is essentially creating electrical impulses in the world, which is leading it to fix itself, creating ozone and fixing the ozone layer. So yeah, there's so many things in the world that seem like they're separate phenomena, but if you really look at it closer, they're actually kind of connected together. It seems like they would be. And this was kind of like the three main things I thought it's really cool. Like, it really does make it seem like the world is a living organism on its own. And then I started digging a bit deeper into it and trying to think about when the Earth was formed and how things would have happened. And I started thinking about the first forms of life on Earth, plants, single-celled algae, things like diatoms and stuff, and what the atmosphere was first made of. So a long time ago, when the atmosphere and the ozone layer were first forming, and then eventually they formed enough so that there was the possibility of life on Earth, most of the particles in the atmosphere were carbon, which obviously we can't, we breathe in oxygen and expel carbon. So the world couldn't support our type of life, but it could support plants which take in carbon and expel oxygen. So I started looking at this as in the world trying to balance itself and what happened. So there's a lot of carbon in the atmosphere. And then for a long time, there was only plants on Earth. Enough plants for the carbon to be used up and for oxygen to fill up in the atmosphere. And then around the time where there would be enough oxygen and less carbon for fauna, so wildlife and us, I guess, when life kind of started, there would have been more oxygen, but a dangerously low amount of carbon for the atmosphere. So Earth needed something to balance that out again. So life came, breathed in the oxygen, and expelled carbon, so creating a balance again. And I really do think that the world is balancing itself and can balance itself. So other things like, say, viruses or diseases or things like that, I do believe that it is really just the world trying to create the homeostasis and balance itself out again, right? There's obviously overpopulation problem, but for the world, that might just be that we're using up too much of the oxygen and producing too much carbon. It needs to kill off some life that is creating carbon, and it needs more plants that are going to create the oxygen, right? So it's just trying to balance itself out. And when we try and stop things like, there's just this will to live longer, right? Everybody wants to live longer now, whether that's healthy or not. There's just too many humans on the planet. There's worse things that start happening. Like, okay, there's some viruses. We try and stop them, and then human life keeps getting overpopulated more and more. So then there's other things that are always going to happen: natural disasters, floodings, and volcanoes, and all that stuff, to try and balance that. So I really do think that the world is always trying to balance itself through these different systems that are in place that we might not understand. And another one of them that, a lot of people have been talking about this one lately, and I really do think that it connects in there a lot. So mushrooms, most people think that fungi or mushrooms are really just, what we eat. But that's actually the fruit of the mushroom system. And the real fungi is actually a web connecting all trees together in the forest. So essentially all trees are connected through this, the name escapes me now of what they call this web. But they've established that trees can communicate with each other through impulses through these webs. And trees actually are sentient and have memories and share memories and thoughts with other trees and other creatures. So this is why, sometimes you'll walk in the forest, you feel really flustered or something, you just need to get grounded. And some people will go in the forest or anywhere is really in nature and just feel this connection with the earth. Or sometimes you might feel like you just have this knowledge that that you didn't realize was inside of you. But it could very be possible that, it's just a connection with this, in a way, the internet or of the trees and these webs. So the interesting thing too is when you start thinking about humans being kind of like just a tool of the earth, right? We're just there to create balance in a way. Because if you look at feedback loops in the body, typically the brain would send a signal somewhere in the body, and then whatever is set up there saying you're sending signal to your hip if you have pain, and then the hip's gonna tell the brain, okay, there's pain here or something's not right, and you're gonna say, okay, this isn't okay, it hurts, or some kind of impulse like that. We might actually just be biofeedback for the earth, as in the trees share all the memories. Gaia, the earth, might actually just have this system where when we die, our thoughts could go back to the earth, and that way the earth knows what's right, what's wrong, what it needs to do to balance itself. So I really do think that there's this big connectedness in the world that we don't understand. The earth has been there, so much longer than anybody really knows, and it's always regulated itself. It's always found a way to fix itself. And for that to happen, realistically, for that to happen, there has to be some type of system in place or functions. There has to be something that's gonna fertilize the ground. There has to be something that's gonna bring nutrients to different parts of the ocean. There has to be something to balance out the atmosphere. There has to be something that can, for example, another thing, earthquakes and tsunamis and other natural disasters can actually slow down the rotation of the Earth. So as we become more overpopulated, heat up the Earth with different things, the Earth is going to spin faster on its own. It's natural. It would have done the same with a normal warming phase, but we typically tend to see more natural disasters now. It's stronger hurricanes, stronger earthquakes. They're happening more frequently, and that's just a natural occurrence when the Earth is spinning faster. And it's also creating change and creating balance in the world, right? It's destroying certain things to either create new mountain ranges or bring different terrain changes and everything like that. So there's just so many systems that I realize in the world that are out there, and they all seem to connect together. And I just think there isn't so many people right now that are looking at these things possibly as a whole, as opposed to just say studying the diatoms as something separate or studying the ocean currents as something separate. So I think that somebody, and I have been doing a lot more research on this lately and wanted to start writing about this as well. But I think that there is, just this connectedness to the world. And if we understood everything as a whole rather than all these different places or all these different parts to it, that we might uncover something in the world that, we kind of should. I think it would be pretty interesting.
Nervous system, really the fungi being.
Yeah, the fungi would be essentially the nervous system of the body, or possibly even tie into the endocrine system of the body, with all the trees being connected underground through this kind of mapping, just like how our bodies are connected with the nervous system. And yeah.
So how do they know the thing about the trees having memory and?
Well, basically through sharing impulses like that. So if I'll have to pull up the article and read, but they did a few tests and realized that trees have adapted to things that have happened in the past. And like, let's say a similar example is whales, who they've been around South Georgia, this island in the Antarctic. They were being hunted for a long time, and they didn't come back for hundreds of years until they stopped whaling, because even the younger generations knew that there was something there. Like the older ones would have taught them. Forests were very similar. Apparently, there's some examples where trees adapted to what was going on around them, based on probably just sharing of memory, or whether that's the same way that we store memories in our brains. Probably quite different. It's probably more of an impulse. But it was proven that there is this connectiveness between trees, where one tree can communicate to another through this impulse. And like you said, creating a bitter taste on a tree, if a deer was going after another one. But that's recent that they've discovered this, so I'm sure that we're going to hear a lot more things about it in the recent future.
What the effects of when they're doing, what is it?
Like
Forestry.
Logging, yeah.
Yeah, like when they do clear cut.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it's the old growth forest that has the most mycelium that communicates.
Mycelium, that's what it is, yeah.
And when
Yeah.
they dig it all up, it gets killed.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just a few
But
things that
it knows how to correct itself, like you said. It's a self-healing organism, like the body is.
Well, we notice a lot of things. Like, obviously, I do think there is a point of no return. Like I think, okay, get rid of all forests on the planet. It's gonna be hard for, and even if we were to replant, it's just not the same. It's just not. If there is shared memory between trees, if we would wipe them all out and then try and replant, it just wouldn't. It just wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't have like kind of that ancient knowledge or,
But
yeah,
if it's all underground,
yeah. But
it
I
might
think
come back.
it might come back or it might
I think
reform.
of,
But
like when you pass Frank's Slide, for example, like everything just wants to thrive. You know, a massive mountain came down and it was just
Yeah.
rubble over it. You see trees coming up in rock, like
yeah.
like how is that?
No, it's true, and I like I said, I think that there's really an like functions in the world to try and rebuild itself or bring back that equilibrium. But I think the harder we try to ruin things on Earth, the more dramatic things will happen to try and bring that equilibrium back, right? Like, well, really just the hurricanes. The hurricanes that we're seeing now is just so frequent in hurricane season than before. And you notice it too in our winters and everything else. There just needs to change to try and bring that balance back. So I think if we keep, you know, deforestation and polluting the oceans and all of these things, I just think that what needs to happen to counteract that force is just going to be bigger. It's just going to be bigger earthquakes, bigger. Well, we're kind of overdue for a super volcano. And all those sorts of things. So, yeah.
Interesting. Then there's the whole thing of how much of that is man-made as well. You know about with HARP and the
Yeah, that's really interesting too. That's a whole different topic, but
I
yeah,
know. So,
yeah.
you know how much, like you were talking about overpopulation. What makes you think we're overpopulated? This is a huge planet.
Yeah.
And is it truly overpopulation, or is it just poor management? Is it?
I think. Yeah, I mean, poor management for sure. Like, we could support the amount of life we have on Earth now if things were managed better, but that would be like dramatic changes, and then we would need to repopulate people around the equator to more northern regions and just use the equator to our benefit, where there's 2 harvest seasons, warmer weather all year, and just use those regions to grow a lot of food. But yeah, there's a lot of things you got to get rid of to make that work. Yeah.
For one, like we live in such lives of luxury, and
Yeah.
we want anytime.
Yeah, and just the thought that you have to have more than somebody else, right? Like, nobody would give up, or few people, especially in the West, would give up the way that they live to share their food with everybody else and share their living space with everybody else. It's just
We may be forced.
yeah, yeah,
I think that also depends on the systems you're using, because you could still live very comfortably if we spent the last 700 years actually figuring out how to do it sustainably instead of just in a corporate kind of. Because each person could have the ability to be more sustainable, still have all the luxuries, but not necessarily do it in a way that's
Stop
depleting.
recording here.
sure.